Thank you, Nicoletta. Then I would like to come back to my speech. I would like to talk about the role of the state for environmental protection. Somehow it is understandable that there is a disorientation in drafting environmental policies in the countries. This is due to the fact that in a 30 years period, we have passed from an extremely localized concept of damage and protection with an immediate cause effect to a global vision on climate change, to epidemic cases, increases cases of cancer, and to the real risk of compromising the survival of the planet. Undoubtedly, scientists and sensitivity of the public opinion goes beyond the national boundaries and national borders, and places commitments that must be global right in the center of environmental interest. We are now far from what is foreseen in the Italian Penal Code, loss of dangerous things. Faced with these difficulties, the subject of environmental protection has been taken over by the European superstate, passing from national legal systems to a superlegal system, the European one. The European Union has acted mainly through instruments which had the aim to protect environment, to reduce emissions, but market-based instruments, through which it was the hope to reach the lowest possible cost, the emission reductions and the environmental impact. Now we can say that things haven't gone so well. These markets suffered the global economic phenomena, such as robotization, which allows companies to acquire machinery and softwares instead of training personnel, more difficult to move and to replace, the development of internet, we all buy things online and goods, and of course globalization all over the world. What is important is that companies today can choose in which legal system to establish their headquarters. They can choose where to pay taxes and in which market and what skills to buy. Fiat is no longer in Turin. It's somewhere else between Italy, US, and the Netherlands. Amazon is a company, a US company that acts worldwide, but has no physical stores. It pays taxes only in Luxembourg. Apple is a US leading technology, fabricates goods in China, and has no physical stores in EU, apart from a few representative boutiques. And while individual countries and states are trying to put the salt on the tail to force this company to at least to pay taxes, these large industrial butterflies fly from flower to flower, from country to country, looking everywhere for the best offers of establishment in terms of taxes. So you can see that the relation of forces has been reversed. Now is states that compete with each other in order to offer the best industrial conditions in low taxes and low environmental standards. I have recently defined this phenomena as industrial nomadism, where environmental protection guaranteed by any legal system is ineffective due to the practical impossibility of enforcement. The economy is now supranational, and above all is supra each legal system. Ilva plant is also an example. The European superstate is the only legal system in the world that sets clear environmental limits. EU faces a crossroad at this moment. On one hand, has the option to impose on companies great efforts and burdens which can impact in the localization of companies or making goods, European goods, less competitive in the worldwide market. On the other hand, there is the option to accept that emissions continue to rise, endangering the future of the planet in return for immediate electoral or industrial consensus. There is a lot of talk today about the carbon border tax. President von der Leyen also referred to it as a possible solution. Allow me a brief consideration in this regard. First of all, we have in Europe a system which is called emission trade scheme, which is a sort of taxation set on the production side, and the carbon border tax, it will be a taxation on the import. This means that even if this carbon border tax could work, we think the EU production and the EU companies will still be outclassed out of EU. Let me bring you an example. Let's imagine an industrial company such as ceramic, steel, paper company, which exports towards a third country, let's say Turkey. The EU production will carry the environmental taxations that we have in EU, and will find in Turkey or in other third countries companies which not only don't have these burdens, but will not pay any carbon border tax, because the carbon border tax is set in the borders of the EU, so entering on the EU soil. Furthermore, a carbon border tax, it seems to be to promise a protection to companies against the carbon leakage risk. This is not true, and on this error perception, the EU could remove some small benefits and free allowances to companies with unpredictable effects on not only on industry but on jobs. But let me go back to the role of the state. Whether it is understood as national or as European Union legal state, the state must take decisive and propulsive role on environmental sustainable behaviors on the part of European or non-European companies, not just setting up allegedly market-based instruments like emission trading scheme, and for the rest follow the Trump solution with border taxes and duties. Looking for environmental effectiveness and protecting the most sustainable European industry requires a more courageous vision, because the world has changed. First of all, the legislator should remember that no virtuous behavior will ever be adopted in a structured way by companies if this behavior is not perceived as beneficial. Incentives, duties, obligations do not represent these conditions. These measures deploy their effectiveness only in the proximity, in the presence of the state. And if the state does not supervise or does not continue its incentive action, prerequisites that generates virtuous behaviors will fall. Therefore, the task of the state must be to impose these conditions that make environmentally sustainable behaviors advantageous for industrial competitiveness and for profitability of companies. Because if the promotion is based on competitiveness, on competitive effectiveness, on the profitability of sustainable companies, then on the market, this industry that pollute less, instead to what happens today, do not have environmental obligation will win. Those without environmental obligation will win. Example can already be given, such as waste management in planning treatments against the NIMBY effect, or tax benefits for the work in the circular economy sector to make secondary raw materials more competitive in the market, or, as I indicated in the charge on emissions proposal, to lighten the VAT on goods manufactured with high shares of renewable sources. So you see that the point is that if the economy seems to produce with supranational dimensions, this does not mean that it must do so without rules. The role of the state in these times of globalization and industrial nomadism, I believe, must include knowledge, responsibility, decision-making capacity, and a lot of courage. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a good conference.